thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Great ball around the corner, Petticini. He beats them all. Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle. Sharks coming through. None of them can hold this.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. And finally getting the boys together for a win. It's my good mates, Sixties and Chris. Fellas, fantastic to have you on the podcast after a W. It's been a long time coming, but we got there. How you doing?
Hang on, a win? Did we win?
What is this?
What's going on?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is really, really good. And I've got to ask you, Chris. I've got my suspicions as to what that jersey is. We haven't had any chance to talk in the green room before this podcast, so let's just jump straight in and ask you what the jersey is today.
Well, you know, I like to throw on a different one each week, and a special win requires a special jersey. So this is the 1997 M&M jersey. So I think most Parramatta collectors will know this one. Definitely the pride and joy of my collection. Comes out on big occasions.
Well, nothing bigger than actually getting the first win of the season, being able to talk about it, and then maybe having a bit of a look at what might be the second win of the season coming up. But we'll delve into that a little bit later. John, good to see you today, mate. You doing well?
Yeah, I am doing well. Just trying to make sure we're connected to our chat. So, sorry, I'm not seeing anything popping up in chat at the moment. So if anyone is chatting, I apologise. I was jump onto the actual live chat here. But yeah, sorry to be scatterbrained, but I am doing well. It's like I said, it's been a long time coming. I think that Junior and Jason Ryles shared some great thoughts about the process of the Parramatta Eels, and certainly we know that the earlier results in rounds 1 and 2 were not what we've been looking for from the squad, but what we'd seen in recent weeks was definitely building towards a win. So very much deserved, boys, and I got to say, barring what I think the New South Wales Cup maybe letting a win slip, and then the Lisa Fiola getting done in by what is an incredible Canterbury Bulldogs team in that grade, it was a really good weekend for the Parramatta Eels. So really keen to break it all down. Got a lot of news to discuss, both with Parramatta and Paradise and the NRL, and even in England now. Breaking news coming to the podcast just before we started streaming about the
That's
NRL
a change.
And the Super League. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
for a change.
For a change. But yeah, we'll get to that very, very soon. But I'll give the quick plug here. Obviously, we've got the sponsors of the show, Parramatta Leagues, the home of the Eels. Really happy to be partnered with them and be able to connect with this incredible fan base that both TCT and the Eels share. And Para Leagues is just it's an incredible venue, and we're very privileged to be able to do our pre-game shows there, 60s, and we've had some great turnouts at Sterlo's in recent weeks, and we look forward to that throughout the year. And of course, alongside Paraleagues is our long-term partners, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Neuron, and Parramatta, of course, who have been with us since pretty much day dot, and the crew out that way with Greg and company have always been incredibly supportive of the tip sheet, so massive thanks to that. And of course, we've got a few people here watching live, and we always get listeners on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and of course YouTube in the post. So if you are following any of those platforms, give us a little bit of a like and a subscribe, because you guys know how much that helps the metrics. And you see all the kids these days smash that like button and whatnot. We don't need you to smash it; just tap it very gently. But yeah, just a quick shout out to the crew that I can see: Ben, Jason, a certain Chris Ricketts has already given us a test in there as well, and Josh. Good evening, and looking forward to talking some football.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I forget, John, as well, don't forget the 50-50 raffle, which helps to support the Eels Foundation. That's on sale every week. And as I said, you don't have to be at Eels home matches to claim the prize for 50-50 raffle. So get behind the Eels Foundation and all the great work they'll be doing. But, mate, let's crack on with the news.
News team, assemble!
fellas, I'm going to throw first of all to some of the rumours that are floating around at the moment. We've had a player named as part of a rumour. We've had a player not named as part of a rumour. A suggested son of a winger or something like that floating around. You notice how it's all the non-specifics and, as always, we just get hammered with messages about this. What do we know about this? What do we know about that? Guess what? We know nothing about it, really. I mean, we know as much as the next person with regard to that, but we might be able to put a little bit of perspective on it, even if we can't put great details into it. But, John, I'll throw to you first. The St George New South Wales Cup 5'8" has featured in rumours. He's the named player that the Eels are reportedly chasing. What do you think about him? Because that was actually news that was put out, I believe, in the New South Wales Cup.
Yeah, we missed this because we were doing our pre-game, obviously live at Sturlows at Parramatta Leagues, and we had the Cup stream on the big screen behind us, and we were reporting tries as they happened. We actually managed to cover a few in the course of the podcast, but we didn't have the commentary on, so we missed this. But apparently in the pre-game coverage, the commentary team had linked the Parramatta Eels to Lycan King Togia, who is a talented young, I'll say half, but he has played at fullback too. So he's got a bit of that versatility factor there for St. George. And his name has popped up in the headlines a couple of times recently because of the whole half situation out at St. George and Illawarra. And yeah, he was first time I'd seen it, but he'd been linked to us in that coverage there. And he had a pretty good game against us. And he is an interesting player because he fits a very similar mold to what we saw or what we do see from Joash Papali and what we see in probably a trio of Parramatta players in our pathways, Arpa Twiddle, Lorenzo Talataina, and Lincoln Fletcher. So, yeah, is this I was sort of joking to you, Sixties, if there is any meat to this rumour, and we're not sure, but is this a case of the Eels sort of doing a Bulldogs and starting to stock up and hoard up all the talented young playmakers going around? Well,
look, maybe, but honestly, and I'll throw to you, Chris, here, it doesn't seem like it's a high-profile signing for the Eels. It seems like more of either, if it is true, a project player, a depth player, someone that's maybe not necessarily immediately ready to step into a 5/8 role in first grade, but someone who maybe the Eels might develop. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think with these kind of players, if we go down this path and sign a player like this, I think it leaves us open to maybe bolster the squad elsewhere. And reading the tea leaves, if we do sign someone like this, it doesn't clog your pathways. So it still leaves open all the players that Jono just referenced to have the potential to maybe move into first grade at some point in the future. If you sign, say, a Lockie Galvin for whatever it takes, 6-7 years at $1 million a year, whatever the market rate is, then that effectively closes that shut, and you're basically resigning yourself to the fact that you're going to lose all these talented youngsters. If they sign a player like to get Tajia from the Dragons, it just adds competition and it allows you to invest elsewhere. So if we do go down this path, I think it'll be a little bit of an indication in which direction the club is looking with regards to the 5'8" position for the next year or so.
Yeah, I would say so too. John, there's another rumour floating around that we really don't want to get into because I don't know whether it's a piss take. I don't know whether it's serious, but we've seen a bit of mail float around where it's almost like naming names and that sort of thing. And what I would suggest to people is if you see the information, take it with a grain of salt, because I get a bit wary about seeing that sort of mail. So because sometimes it's especially when you start to see numbers and names of people involved in negotiations, that sort of stuff. It's not a good place to take the rumours, and especially if there's no truth to the rumours. So I'm gonna suggest to people steer clear of that. The other one is this. It's not very specific, but it's around a winger or a son of a winger. Is that no, younger brother of a winger? Is that right, John?
Yeah, we had a little bit of mail come our way about a potential pickup of a younger sibling that plays wing. So we'll have to see if we can track something down there. But it's always interesting getting those little tips, and hopefully there is something to it, because we do like hearing a little bit of mail here and there, especially when it's not going to get the club in any trouble. So yeah, good stuff there. And if we do find anything out about that, of course you'll catch it here first on the tip sheet. But definitely something to monitor there, 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, without further ado, let's jump into Team List Tuesday.
Yeah, well, coming off that breakthrough win against the St. George Illawarra Dragons in the first game of Golden Point this year, I believe, there was never really any doubt that Jason Ryles was going to name as close to an unchanged team list as possible, obviously pending injury and suspension, which are factors outside of a coach's control. But he has indeed named the same 17 men that secured that breakthrough victory for the Parramatta Eels. We do have Riley Smith again named to start, so provisionally getting that maiden NRL start. We'll have to wait and see if it plays out on Saturday night, with the Eels playing 7:35 p.m. out at TIO Stadium, not GIO Stadium. That's not in Canberra, it's in Darwin. But yeah, you got that one constant removed there for the Raiders. And it's actually the third time we've met the Raiders, or we'll meet the Raiders there, boys, having been successful against them in 2014 and 2019, I want to say. With a couple of single point margin of victory wins there. But yeah. 2014,
didn't Hayne feature in
and
securing the win?
And I think that might have been, there was some interesting Dally M points spread out that game that ended up leading to him getting his tied second Dally M as well. So yeah, he definitely spearheaded a victory back in that one there. So the Eels with the chance to, the way I badged it in the team list post was it's the final ball of the innings of the game, and they've got a chance to secure a hat-trick. So we'll have to wait and see, given that the Darwin setup is obviously coming to an end this year. But the Eels look like this on the back of all those non-changes. Iongi at fullback, Addo Carr and Zach Lomax on the wing, so officially ratifying Lomax on the wing there. Although I wouldn't say it's a much ado about nothing, boys, but it wasn't really mentioned by the media, but he quite happily interchanged between centre and wing when Jordan Samrani was in the team. So it's not like he wasn't playing on the flank. But that paves the way for Will Penasini and Sean Russell to play at right and left centre. Dylan Brown, his best game of the season by some margin, will be in the halves with Dean Hawkins, Joe Ofengahi and Junior Barlaw in the front row. Riley Smith, like I said, provisionally named at number 9, but let's wait and see whether he gets that maiden start or if there is a pre-game shuffle. On the left edge, Sean Lane. On the right, Gideon Katonga, Jermaine Hopgood at lock forward. On the interchange, Dylan Walker, Luca Moretti, Charlie Geimer, and Sam Tuivasa. Those rotation players very good last week, so they're going to be big factors in the Darwinian conditions. Extend the roster, and this is definitely something to watch too, boys, because of the nature of being up in the top end and not being in Sydney or anywhere sort of adjacent to Sydney. Joash Papali, Dan Keir, Bally Simonson, Ronald Volkman, and Ryan Madison. I would not be surprised if they took 2 or 3 of those players up to Darwin, boys, which will impact the reserve grade team because they play on the same day at 5 o'clock, Lidcombe Oval, I believe. So definitely a few things there to monitor, but no surprises that Ryles has named essentially the same team, pending those extra additions, not so much the changes, but those extra guys that get taken on tour.
Yeah, I mean, you had to expect, Chris, that there wasn't going to be any team changes this week after securing that first win.
Yeah, the only question would have been whether they'd pushed Bailey back up after he'd gotten his legs under him, playing a bit of cup. Maybe he could have squeezed into the side, but I thought the backs all played well on the weekend. And just as an aside, did you guys see the press conference with Ryles and Junior, where they were Ryles was talking about the game plan, and Junior just
coach.
Shyly, coach, giving away the game plan.
Yeah.
That was very funny.
Yeah, although as Ryles said, they only have to look at the tape to work out what's...
That's obviously, honestly 99% of rugby league is the tape shows pretty much everything you need to see.
Yeah, but look, it was the sort of game where we spoke about it in the instant reaction. It wasn't perfect. There was still plenty for the Eels coaches to get stuck into this week, but we didn't really want to focus on any of that last week because the good that could come out of that win in terms of just the mindset of the players moving forward. You know, a bit of self-belief, belief in the systems, the bloke next to them. That was going to be the main take out of that. And no doubt Ricky and the Raiders will be looking at all the different ways that they can exploit issues that the Eels might still have in the team. But it's that inclusion of Dylan Walker last week for mine was a significant one. And he's now had another week to get to know the players around him, to get to know the systems, the plays, all the calls. When you think about it, he got one full field session last week. That was it. They do a bit of skills work because there was only one full field session last week. They had like a bit of a skills session the day before the main session. As I reported, it was probably the best session that I'd seen in the season itself. And then they had the captain's run on the Friday, and that was it. That was his familiarisation with the team. He's going to get better and better the more that he becomes familiar, not just with his teammates, but with the plays. So really looking forward to the impact that he brings. And really we saw a lot of that around the halves, didn't we? Even though he was playing that middle extra playmaker role, the amount of pressure that he took off Dylan Brown and Dean Hawkins was tangible. It really was. So anyway, that's good. John, how about you jump into the injury report there, because it's unfortunate, but it's also interesting just to have a bit of a dive into.
Yeah, there is one major addition to the injury report and then another mid-range addition, both of which will impact our depth in the back line. But no changes on the timelines for Mitchell Moses, Jack Williams and Joey Lussick, fellas. The first two players in Mitch and Jack, who are obviously core starters for the squad, both due back or expected back after that round 8 bye to take on the Cronulla Sharks, which is obviously very fitting for both players, given that last time Mitch came off a long-term injury, he was making his return against the Sharks, and for Jack, it's his former club. So, again, rugby league working out a script that you wouldn't believe if someone had actually written it. It would be just way too cheesy. But another addition here in Joey Lussick, who's due back in round 11. I think it was 11 to 12 last time, so they've solidified that timeline now. He had surgery on a thumb, I believe, a broken thumb, so he'll be back a couple of games after that pair. And now Jake Tungor, he's got a bit of an open recovery window here with a hip injury from round 7 to 9, so he could be back as early as next week, but it could be another week after that. And then the unfortunate one, boys, and the one that you don't want to see, Arthur Miller-Stephen, coming off an ACL injury last year, has now done what we believe is his other knee, and he's been ruled out for the season. That's just absolutely diabolical, and your heart breaks, that sort of thing, when you see a young player just being bogged down by injury. You know, we've seen it with Hayes Dunster in recent times, and you hope that Artie can have a bit of a better break than what happened to Hayes, but he's not far off right now of back-to-back season-ending knee injuries.
Yeah, fellas, unfortunately, it was an injury that happened on the training track. As obviously that's the sort of thing we can't discuss. And it was one of those innocuous ones. Like, it was just, as they so often are with those knee injuries. And as John said, yeah, it's the other knee. So horrible luck for Artie after missing all of last year with an ACL on one knee to now have the ACL, as we believe, on the other one. So we can only wish him a speedy recovery and an effective recovery as well, because he's still a young bloke. We hope there's still football ahead for him, because he's a talent, and he's got one NRL game on his resume. Let's hope down the track he gets a few more there. So anyway, we move on. And John, the New South Wales Cup team list.
Yes, Eels coming off that 28-all draw with the Dragons, and they've got a couple of inclusions and a couple of changes. In the back line, we've got Arpa Twiddle reprising his role at fullback. He had a good game against St. George, scored a try and set up a try in a pretty handy showing at the fullback there. Hayes Dunster returns. Speaking of those bad luck players, hopefully Hayes can stay healthy now after a couple of weeks out. And he'll be on one wing with Bowie Simonson named on the other. Araz Namva gets his second game in the grade at centre. And I believe he'll play on the right edge with Jordan Samrani. Am I getting this around the wrong way? Maybe it's the other way around. Sorry. But Araz Namva and Jordan Samrani in the centres. Joash Papali gets his second game in the half, so a lot of second game efforts here. And he'll partner Ronald Volkman. Matt Dury back from injury. That's a good boost there for the Parramatta Eels. He'll start in the front row alongside Brendan Hands and Tony Matayeli. Kelma Tuolangi and Dan Key will be on the edges with Ryan Madison at lock forward. Cruz Natili Schmidt is the reserve or utility dummy half. Wiramu Greg, Kane Kalash, and Bryce Cartwright. So Greg and Cartwright back after a week or two out with some niggles, and I'm not sure if Wiramu was suspended. That wouldn't be a surprise. He's got a bit of a rep there with the judiciary. But a very experienced bench there for the Eels with Wiramu and Bryce back in the fold. And they are playing out at Lidcombe Oval, 5 o'clock p.m, taking on the Canberra Raiders. So that's a double header out there too, boys. Flag and Cup. So that'll be a good one there. But Eels looking pretty sharp there. A lot of young players in the team, which is good to see, but some experience as well. And this is I think the Raiders are below the Eels in this grade. I think the flag is very close, but the Raiders were, let me just quickly tell you. The Raiders are below the Eels. There you go. Memory not too bad. 2 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss for the Eels, and 1 win, 3 losses for the Raiders. So Parramatta, the better team on exposed form here, but it's still early in the season and a lot can change. So that's how we line up.
So Chris, a lot of things that people have been wanting to see. They want to see a bit more of Arpa Twiddle in senior football. So that's good. And of course, that his inclusion at fullback means that also for the second week in a row, we see Joash Papali in the 5/8 role, which supporters have also been keen to see as, I guess, a bit of a safeguard with the drop in form that Dylan had before last week, although last week very much a raised performance from Dylan Brown. And it's and Ryan Madison perhaps getting closer to a recall. He probably had his best game in New South Wales Cup. Well, it wasn't probably, it was definitely. He had his best game in New South Wales Cup this season. So perhaps there's some thinking that he might be closer to getting a recall for NRL. So how do you see that team, Chris?
Yeah, it's the New South Wales Cup team should always be a tool for trying to get the best results in the NRL. So I like the fact that you're giving Joash a go at 6 last week and this week. It probably gives an indication that the club is going to use every avenue available to it over the next, call it 9 months or 12 months before next season starts, to try and identify whether they've got the talent from within with regards to the 5/8 position. And Joash playing at 6 gives us an indication that maybe they see a world in which Iongi and Joash can both be in the squad at the same time in the starting first grade side. So I think it looks good. Again, curious to see how many of these players actually line up on Saturday Arvo, because I expect you might see a couple of them be taken up to Darwin. Maddo and probably, I expect Bailey would probably travel as a travelling reserve outside back. So I would expect maybe a couple of those guys probably won't line up on Saturday afternoon. But overall, a strong side. And I think the thing that's been lacking the last few years for us, our cup side has really struggled, particularly in the first half of the year. This year, we've started out pretty well. And I think it's good that you have players who are jostling for position and putting a bit of pressure on the first grade team, because I think our squad has been very top heavy previously. And now we're starting to round out with a bit more depth, and it's encouraging to see some of that coming through. Obviously Artie Miller-Stevens, that's heartbreaking for the young player. So we lose a bit of depth there, but we do have Richie Penasini playing flag. Sorry, Jono, I mean, you're going to get to that, so hope I haven't stolen any of your thunder there. But
I'll let it slide.
A big spoiler. Mate, what are you doing to our show?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, lads, but with Hayes coming back and Richie coming through as well, I mean, there is a bit of outside back depth. Overall, pretty exciting, and Arpa Twiddle's an exciting talent. Along with Lorenzo Talatina in full. These two kids are potentially the future of the club. So I don't mind the idea that, again, like we were talking about, you give some of these, you see what you've got there before you go and block that pathway at 6.
Yeah, and we'll, as a little bit of a early tip for our listeners, we will be speaking to Steve Georgalis tomorrow, recording a chat with him as we get into the final series of the junior reps. We'll talk about that very, very shortly. But John, before we go too much further, let's quickly run through the Jersey Flegg team list.
Yeah, they christened the High Performance or Centre of Excellence with a 12-point victory over St. George on Saturday. So a great way to start the sort of history of that venue now, and they look like this. Again, they've sort of been the benefactors and also losers of the changes above them, and this week I suppose they're the benefactors. A couple of back rollers dropping back to this grade after getting some time in Cup. So we look at fullback where Jaden Ambici will start in the number 1. Muhammad Al-Madine and Bradley Avery are on the wings. Antioch Vitala Mariner at right centre. Richard Penasini at left, which was spoiled by Chris. Wow. But yes, Richard Penasini at his left centre position there. In the halves, Matty Hunter and Cooper Fuller swapping jerseys this week. So Hunter in the 6, Fuller in the 7. I don't think that means too much given how they play, but for what it's worth, they have swapped jerseys, at least that's how the club has named them. Damascus Nemia and Tiankan Brown are your bookends. Jack Hudson at dummy half. Dom Destratus on the left edge. Tyrese Lakini coming back from Cup on the right. And Saxon Pryke also joining him back in Flegg after some time in Cup at lock forward. Paddy Spence is the utility on the bench. Jalen Taewa and Yeti Samuelu sort of staples on the interchange this year, and they've been very good. But the one player who was starting last week and made an impression, scored 2 tries, fellas, and has held his place in the team, but did get bumped to the interchange because of the experienced Lucchini and Pryke coming back in, is Sebastian Piacala, and that's a deserved reward for the young forward. I thought he was very good, 60s, scoring those 2 tries, playing some good, positive football, and a really talented young forward, and good to see him holding his place in this team.
Chris, we're gonna speak very briefly about all the results in just a moment, but you just touched on how the New South Wales Cup team are enjoying a better start to the season. It wasn't going to take too much for the Jersey Flegg to enjoy a better start to the season this year after losing the first 7 on the trot last year. But they really are playing a positive brand of football. In fact, watching them play, fellas, they're actually playing in the manner of football that Jason Ryles is searching for with the NRL team. It's a real up-tempo game, a lot of fast work through the forwards, driving up through the middle before, letting the backs have a bit of work. But it's just that speed, that tempo that they play at. And I think they've got a very good rotating dummy halves to achieve that as well, with Jack Hudson and Paddy Spence, who really are delivering good ball there. But it's really important, as you said, Chris, to have the lower grades playing well, because you want that winning mentality coming through from lower grades. And of course, when it comes to New South Wales Cup, you also want players in good form that are ready to be called on.
Yeah, it's also interesting. If you look at Flegg, it's not just their attack that's been amazing this year. I mean, they've got by far and away the best defensive record in the competition. And our Flegg team's obviously one to keep an eye on as we come into the back half of the year, because we've got a red-hot SG ball team, and you'd be hazarding a guess that a handful of those boys will come up and play Flegg once the end of the ball season happens. So they're a good chance of really going a long way this year, I think, that Flegg team. And as you say, winning is contagious. So if you're winning all through the grades, we've seen it at Penrith in recent years, then that will translate to on-field success in ones when these guys come through.
Yeah, well, let's have a bit of a recap of the weekend, seeing as though we're speaking about winning being contagious. Winning is also a very good feeling. Boys, have you got any final thoughts on that win in the first grade? I'll throw to you first, Chris. Any final takes?
You guys covered it with big smiles on your faces on Sunday night, and I enjoyed every minute of it. On Saturday night. The only thing I would add to this is it's the manner in which we won as well. So I think if we'd gone out, if you contrast to late in the season last year, we hosted the Dragons. We were up 44 to not many, and they scored 5 tries in 10 minutes, and we hung on to win 44-40. Kind of leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth. But when you compare it and contrast it with the fact that we were down 20-8, and we came home like a train, and you could really start to see some green shoots there. Dylan Walker providing shape. Dylan Brown was able to just focus on what he does well. I still maintain he's a centre, not a 5'8", but you see that shape, and you start to see what I'm guessing you had seen on the training paddock 60s during the off season, when it looked like they had some great attacking structure, and they were really starting to utilize some of the pace that Ryles had recruited. It was really encouraging to see the way we came back and finished that game so strong. Momentum's everything, and I hope we take that momentum up to Darwin, which has obviously been a poison chalice in recent years.
Yeah, there's no need to get me started on Darwin, because the nightmare for me is about to finish this year. So, and I'm not casting aspersions on Darwin or the wonderful people up there, but the team was done with playing up there. They just couldn't find a way to win. And let's hope we do find a way to win against the Raiders this week. John, your final takes on getting that first win?
Yeah, look, I got very indulgent after the win with the weekend wrap and all our post-game stuff, and maybe even this podcast we'll see at the intermission. But it was just such a relief. And I was saying in the comments when I was replying to people to the weekend wrap, you saw the little camera I brought along 60s, and I was actually really dirty on myself at the end of the game for not using it more, even though it was because I was caught up in the pulsating contest, because you could feel life being breathed into CommBank Stadium as the Eels clawed and fought and sort of gripped their way into that contest. And the crowd went from being lukewarm and milquetoast early on, where they were kind of like, yeah, we've started 0-4, what are they going to do? I'm not really into this. And they just found they found a gear, and they started whirring, and they started just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And you'll hear it in the intermission music with what I'm doing, but the roar of the crowd just became so visceral, and the energy just started bouncing off the walls. And I think that was the big thing for mine, is the team did the right things. They had absolute conviction in their systems for the first time this year. They, when faced with legitimate adversity, being down 12 points, they could have, well, you don't want to see them do it, but they could have, based on what we'd seen in the first 2 games, sort of rolled over a bit and getting run down or run over. But they found a way. And as a coach, Jason Ryles, like you said, 60s, it wasn't a perfect game, but as a coach, he would have been very happy with what he saw. And the fact that they created the correct spacings in their attack. And we were talking about it in the post-game. Someone posed us a question saying that the line speed didn't look that quick in attack and defense. And I sort of disagreed in defense. I thought that the line speed was very good, especially once Riley came on. But in attack, there was definitely some merit to the thought that we weren't going downhill really fast, but because of the correct spacings created by Dylan Walker, then allowing Dylan Brown to play more direct with the first step, that you had these really great attacking channels for our left edge, and Sean Russell ran through the line a couple of times. So, yeah, just there was a lot of really good fundamental play from the Parramatta Eels and stuff that you can build on and augment and take to another level. And obviously guys like Isaiah Yongi are really the poster child for that. So we got to see some great touches from him. But again, as Raul sort of spoke about in the post-match presser, we're just starting to scratch the surface, and there are good things to come. And there's going to be losses and there's going to be mistakes, but the team is now at the starting line, and it took a big step forwards from that starting line.
John, I really love, I've spoken about how you're the wordsmith at TCT, mate, but when you've just described that match as breathing life into the CommBank Stadium crowd, I don't think anyone could put it any better in terms of the what it brought out in the supporters. I had numerous messages from people who were openly saying that they had a tear in their eye from a win, like just a win. And when we think about it, like we've just had 4 losses. We've scrapped and scraped and fought their way to that single win. And that's how much it meant to people. We know what it meant to the players and staff. We saw the reactions on the sideline that were captured by Eels media. And I'm glad they did that, because that was my take from the game, moving away from the match itself, was how much it meant to everyone. And the scenes on the field were probably expected. The scenes on the sideline as they were riding that last play, all the players there, they knew the field goal was coming. You could see them, up on their feet watching. And when it went over and they realised that it went over, it was like pandemonium as they all just, it was just this emotional release that you could see from the players. Now that they've got that out of the way, and doesn't mean you don't want emotion. We want emotion every time there is a win, but it was like that was that pressure valve released. And that's the main take that I have out of that, because it was great to be in the stands. As you said, you could feel that that life being breathed into the stadium, but even more so, maybe you could feel that life being breathed into the entire squad from that win. So anyway, let's now go on, John, and it's your chance now to take us through your weekend wrap. If people haven't read it, just take us through each of the results.
Yeah, it was, look, you don't have to read it, guys. It was incredibly wordy and verbose, with a very self-indulgent theme about the hero's journey, which is actually a really cool bit of literary sort of lore and history there in terms of what is a foundational bit of writing structure. But in terms of the other results, we mentioned the NRL, Eels winning in Golden Point by 1 point, 23-22, which was obviously a big win there. But we had the Cup drawing 28 all. Quick thoughts here, boys. Eels with some great passages to play, but equally, it felt like St. George found the right channels to attack a lot of those young, inexperienced combinations, which, as I wrote about, is something that you have to expect and sort of take the good with the bad in that regard. And I think that guys like, if you look at the replay, I think Volkman, Nanva, Lakini, all had a couple of misses here and there, which it wasn't so much the one-on-one misses, it was just the combination defense wasn't quite settled, which, again, is to be expected given there's been a lot of shuffling of that roster and those back lines. So I'm not upset. Obviously, you want the win, but very much some teachable moments there for a young team.
Yeah, Chris, I actually thought that the halfback from St. George caught the eye, probably more so than the 5'8", who we are reportedly chasing. But isn't there a bit of talk about, that he should be replacing Lachlan Ilias in first grade?
I don't think there's anyone under more pressure right now than Lockie Ilias, especially coming off the back of kicking out in the full and Golden Point. But yes, I do think that there has been a bit of a not rumour mongering, but rumbling from fans that Glover could be stepping into the halves for the first grade team.
Yeah, he's certainly impressed, Chris.
Yeah, and the conversation is always tricky, as we know, with our former coach, Brad Arthur, when you have cries of potentially nepotism involved as well. Now, whether Jake deserved that or not is really not, we're not going to litigate that on this podcast, but it's unfortunate for Kyle Flanagan, unless you're a Nathan Cleary type where you're almost universally held up as being one of the top handful of players in the game. Your position will always be under significant scrutiny when you're the son of the coach. And Ilias is, as you mentioned, on the hottest of hot seats at the moment. But, I think the fans will always be concerned if it doesn't look like they have points in them, and the Dragons don't. Their spine is, their 6 and 7 is a major issue for them. Then there's always going to be questions over whether the boys in reserve grade should be getting a go. And that will only get louder if, for instance, Parramatta or another club goes and poaches one of these young up-and-coming talents because they don't have a path to first grade.
Yeah, absolutely. John, the flag got to christen the new match field up at Kellyville. They were the first team out there playing on Saturday morning, and they started the ball rolling with the win.
Yeah, we were stealing glances at this sort of before and during our pre-game show at a Para Leagues, and they did a great job here. Seb Piacula opened the scoring for early brace of tries, and then on the stroke of half-time, Bradley Avery scored a fantastic effort on the back of a fantastic effort from our right edge. Really sharp hands from Matty Hunter, I think, to kick it off, and I think you had the Mbichi and Antioch Antioch, with really nice hands there to get Avery over in the corner. And then in the second half, you had Dom Lestratus and Matty Hunter striking again. Been a great combination down the left edge, and Dom strolled in next to the posts before Richard Penasini showed. I suggest watching the highlights. This was a great catch and kick down the left edge, attacking the goal line in that one motion, catching and then putting a grubber kick to the boot, allowing Muhammad Al-Madin, there we go, got there, in his return game to touchdown and put the lead beyond doubt. Really good result. Really strong defense again, boys. Jordan Rankin's done a great job building this team inside out, front to back, with really strong defense and just been highly competitive. And I sort of singled out Jack Hudson as really being the individual that typifies that, but he's not alone, don't get me wrong. But Hudson's been really, really good to start this season, boys. A pickup from Queensland, really combative defender, loves to get involved in offense. So pretty good signs on both sides of the ball from a young dummy half there. And given that we spoke about the SG ball coming up at some point, fellas, because they're going to finish their season hopefully deep into the finals and, you know, at least in the big dance, but who knows. But Lockie Koinakis will come up into this team at one point, and I think that's probably going to pave the way for Jack Hudson to start playing some reserve grade, because he is probably a player that will make a difference in that grade as well. So really good things to see there, and this team continues to impress despite the one loss against the Tigers earlier on. They've been very, very good.
Yeah, in fact, the Dragons' tries was almost out of the blue, because I think one of them was catching an Eels attacking kick on the line and going the length of the field for a try, and then there was a surprise play off a tap restart close to the Eels line where they just went the short side and caught the Eels napping, really, and it actually caught the Eels napping again with another penalty restart where it was just a hit up and they got across the line. So a couple of things there for Jordan Rankin to work on, but as we said, it's a much better start to the season. Now, John, the junior reps, every grade has qualified for the finals.
Yeah, we're really we're really looking forward to talking with Steve Georgalis about this tomorrow, to be released on Thursday, I believe. But yes, in the expanded format now, top 8 in all 4 grades, the Eels got the job done across the Boar, Gale, Mats, and Fiola. So great work done there. Indeed, there was one team that could have probably rested on its laurels, given that they'd secured the minor premiership in the SG Ball, but they certainly had some work to do against Manly, and really enjoyed that task. They relished what they did out there in Narrabeen. But yes, all 4 teams in the final 60s. It's going to be really interesting to see how they now shape up, because I think the Gale found a gear that they haven't shown all year, and we'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, there's every reason to think that we can make a push into at least the second or third week for all 4 grades.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, this is look, we're gonna ask Steve Georgalis in our interview whether this is having all 4 teams qualify for the finals, whether it is validation of the Pathways program, whether it's actually the minimum expectation for the Pathways program, or indeed whether it's a case of it being both. How would you see it as an outsider looking in, but knowing the size of the Eels Junior Rugby League, plus also that mix of external recruitment? What should be our expectations when it comes to the Pathways results?
I think you answered it, 60s, when you said it's both. I think in recent years we have we haven't done a great job with pathways, and with the size of our catchment and the amount of players we have coming through, we should be perennially competitive in most grades. Obviously, the girls' competitions are a fair bit newer, so we're kind of finding our feet in the same sort of time frame as many of our competitors. But when it comes to the boys, if you look at when we've been successful previously, it's always been with players coming through from within. So if you look at our teams from, say, 20 years ago, the Hindmarsh and Kayla's brothers, when you look at those teams, a lot of those guys were juniors that came through. Same with Jared Hayne. And it's obviously always a topical thing for us when you talk about the juniors and the junior pathways, because for any club to be successful, you need to have a nice combination of juniors coming through that you can get on good deals and supplement that with the occasional signing. And so I think it's really, really important that we get this right. And I think Georgialis has done a good job. And he's obviously he's got Nathan Brown at the club, who was involved in pathways not so long ago himself. I think, the combination of a few people there who've got some real keen interest in the space has really put us in the right direction. And, having the ball team undefeated minor premiers, having the flag team starting the competition well, and Mats are a bit hit and miss this year. And I think, is this the first year there's been a top 8? So they probably scraped in by the skin of their teeth, but yes, still they're in the finals and they're a chance. So some important steps forward, I think.
I think where it is a validation is for the investment that they've put into the full-time coaches in pathways. I mean, they've all got other roles within the club as well, but they are able to dedicate the amount of time that's needed for the coaching to get success with their coaching in those pathways games. Now, John, if you could maybe take us through each of the results, and we'll very quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Conscious of the time.
Little blitz of the junior reps. So we start with the SG Ball, who, as we mentioned, came into the Sunday game actually having secured their minor premiership by virtue of the Dogs upsetting the Rabbitohs, I believe. But they were still chasing an undefeated season, and they weren't going to let it slip with a 46-10 victory over the Sea Eagles. Just comprehensively better than their opponents, fellas. I'll let you guys pick apart that in a second. But moving to the Harold Matt same venue, it felt like the Eels were going to run away with this one. At one point, for and against was trending towards finishing 6th on the ladder. But a 20-0 start to this game at halftime gave way to a 26-20 finish as the Sea Eagles piled on 20 points in the second half, meaning the Eels squeaked into that final spot in the finals, which, is still mission achieved, but they made it very, very tense at the end, and Manly certainly had some opportunities they bombed as well. In the Tarsha Gale, even with the NRL's fantastic result, boys, I think this is actually the result of the round. The Parramatta Eels 20 defeating the Canterbury Bulldogs 18. We always bang on about how dominant the Bulldogs are in this grade, and our girls put up a phenomenal fight to secure a huge upset victory. And Sixties and I were sort of tasking the girls with just being physical and competitive and trying to bloody up the Dogs, and they found levels above that with their 2-point win, so well done. And then rounding out the results, the Lisa Fiala Cup, unfortunately, they got run down by the same margin that the SG Ball did to Manly, 46-10 losers. The Dogs, and I'll let you describe this 60s in a second, the Bulldogs just on a completely different level here. And the Fiala are a very talented team for the Parramatta Eels. They've been very good this year, but they got their lunch money taken by a very, very good Bulldogs outfit.
Yeah, I'm going to go now in reverse order, just with a few comments. That Lisa Fiala Cup match, the Eels started really well, got the first try, but not long after that, basically didn't touch the ball for the remainder of the first half. That Bulldogs side, I think it's pretty much a New Zealand invitational team, but a lot of imports that they've recruited, and that's to be expected because when you're talking about fielding pathways teams in the girls pathways, it's if your district doesn't have the number of girls teams that you need to be able to select players from, you're going to have to recruit from elsewhere. And of course, that means that regional players, and players from New Zealand, interstate, whatever the case may be, are given opportunities. And the Dogs have done an exceptional job of recruiting there. So powerful is this Bulldogs Lisa Fia-Ola Cup team. I would go close to backing them beating their Tarsha Gale team, who, until the Eels beat them on the weekend, were sitting undefeated at the top of their grade. That's a measure of the type of football that they were playing. Now, the Eels got a bit more possession in the second half, and it was only 3 tries to 1 in the second half. I would contend that there is a way that they can be extremely competitive, well, more competitive with the Bulldogs team. They have to personally believe that they can beat them on their day, but they would have to really put them off their game in a massive way. But the Eels have finished third in that grade. That'll give you an idea of how well the Eels played during the season. So that was that result. The Tarsha Gale, as John said, it was certainly their grittiest performance of the season, John. They showed a level of resilience that was amazing.
Shah Henry must have been so proud. Like that was really gutsy stuff.
Yeah, they came from behind twice in that game, as I said, against the team that was sitting top of the ladder, undefeated, and to come back twice. And John, they won the physical battle through the middle. Yep. They won that. I mean, it was a tight contest. It was a tough physical contest, but they won that battle through the middle. That's how they got the win, because they kept up that drive through the forwards. And the other thing too, and this shouldn't surprise you at all, is that the girls, they had a 2-point lead, with about 4 or 5 minutes going. They didn't go into their shell. They were still trying to attack the Bulldogs, especially in possession. And I thought, will they try to shut up shop and just play percentage football? No. But they executed it so well that the game finished in that Bulldogs quarter. And they didn't let the Bulldogs out of their half in possession, and they kept applying the pressure. So it was a really deserved win. The SG Ball, not too much to say there, John. That was just a really impressive hit out going into finals football.
Eels had a chance to let some of their look. Depth is the wrong way of putting it, because they're still very talented players, as we saw. But they managed to tap into the deeper parts of their squad, resting a number of core players here, and brought back Dom Farrugia as well, who had a great game. So yeah, Fletcher and Talatina continue to be amazing. Lockie Koinakis had a great game. He was controlling all the play from dummy half with his boot and his pass. The try assist out to Nathan Howlett from dummy half was outrageous, that cutout pass. Just really good football. The middles are fantastic. The edge forwards, busy, and the rest of the team just feed off it. So really, really good team. And we know that finals football is a completely different beast, a completely different competition. But I will be very disappointed if they don't go deep into the finals, because this team it really evokes the same sort of energy that the 23 and 17 squads did. And I think that they should be challenging for the title.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, the Harold Matts. That was really a performance which mirrored the entire season, where in the same game, in the same game, Chris, you just got the most amazing attacking football. Like it was almost a perfect game of football from the Eels in the first half to lead 20-0 against Manly. Manly were ahead of them on the table, running sixth. Not only did they score some sizzling tries, some of their moments in defence, the desperation defence, which prevented Manly from scoring what looked like absolutely certain tries, had to be seen to be believed. And then in the second half, it probably didn't look like the same team had come back out of the sheds. It was there were nothing resembled what we saw in the first half, and that's I mean, we're sort of having a bit of a giggle with it, but it was just such chalk and cheese. It was like unbelievable, like the difference that occurred. And look, they fought their way back out of it, mostly thanks to that massive defensive play by the 5'8" Talon Rosati.
Yeah, jolting the ball loose, allowing Christopher Moala to scoop it up and score against the run of play. Yeah, if that didn't happen, and even with that happening, because Manly actually dropped a couple of balls in Parramatta's own defensive red zone, but without that play from Rosati and Moala then pouncing on the loose ball, you're looking at a draw or a loss. Yeah,
and that's not overstating it. It's exactly how it played out. So anyway, that's how the weekend played out there. I think, John, we got any questions from our viewers there?
We'll smash
on the Eels.
Smash through a few things. First off, massive shout out to Graham and I believe Paul. We've got a couple of watchers from Ireland here, boys. So great to have that intercontinental influence there. Well done. Then we go to the questions. Sam Jabroni in chat is bugging us about merchandise. And look, we're actually we've reached out to some suppliers, haven't we, Craig? We're just waiting to hear back on sort of options and rates and whatnot. So if we can get that happening, yes, Mr. Ricketts, we'll let you know about TCT t-shirts, and you'll be the first to get one. We got some more commentary on liking King Togia. Jason says that his best mate is a Dragon supporter, and apparently at St. George he is rated very highly, but can't get a chance in front of the coach's son. We sort of touched on that, didn't we? Obviously, we spoke about Lycan, but also in relation to the other halfback there, that there is a bit of a bottleneck there because of that familial relationship between the coach and the halfback, and as well as giving Ilias a chance. So maybe it's not the Parramatta Eels, but there is definitely an opportunity here for the other clubs to strike.
John, every time you mention his name, I keep thinking you're giving me your opinion on him.
But yes, signing him would be great if just for the werewolf memes, the lycanthropes and whatnot. So we can do that sort of thing. We got Parra Eels Facts, got a couple of questions here, or statements and questions. Sort of speaking on Dylan Walker, said that Dill came in, made 170 metres or so. Can't wait to see how he goes with more games under his belt. Absolutely. That balance between being able to run the ball with effect and get a good play of the ball, and also be that stabilising influence for our offensive structures was just telling. And like you said, 60s, one field session, one ground session at training under his belt, he's only going to get better. And we're not saying he's going to be a Dally M contender or anything like that, but he is clearly going to aid the Parramatta Eels in their pursuit of winning more games.
We need a key stat from Parra Eels Facts, like Parramatta remain undefeated when Dylan Walker is selected on the interchange.
There we go. And in that vein, he asked also Joe Ash a chance at the first crack at the number 6 jersey this year. And I think that's absolutely a consideration right now. Obviously, the Eels juggling a lot of balls hypothetically about how they're going to sort of fill that Dylan Brown void, being linked to high-profile players like Lachlan Galvin, but that would be a way out in terms of time and distance. Yeah, I think that Joe Ash is absolutely one of the front runners in that regard, which is why you're seeing transition into a frontline playmaker. But obviously, we've just been linked to the St. George playmaker there. And with guys like Lorenzo Talatana and Lincoln Fletcher, there is also competition in the pathways, although Joe Ash is advanced in experience and age in that regard. He's not old, but he's advanced in age compared to them. So I think he's absolutely a consideration, if not for the 6, for the 14 moving forwards in the big picture.
Yep. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the only thing I would add to it would be, 6 months ago, everyone was clamouring for Parramatta to sign Jaden Brayley from the Knights. And I think if we use the hooking position as an example, you don't know where the next talent's going to jolt free from. So, maybe you guys at training may have seen Riley Smith coming, but for most of us fans, we wouldn't have seen it coming. Obviously, he came in and carved up it in the preseason, and all of a sudden, he looks like the best, most positive thing to come out of this season so far. So you don't know. We as fans quite often don't know what's in the pathways, or how the players are looking at training, or what potential the club sees in some of these young players who could potentially play 6. if you can get a 5'8", and I'll quote Ben Johnson, friend of the program. He said that you could basically put anyone next to Mitchell Moses and they're going to look good. So the question then becomes, do you need to spend the money at that position? The only thing I would say with someone like a Galvin, if you get a Lockie Galvin, you get him long term, then he can then become the future of the club beyond Mitchell Moses,
and becomes the guy that you can park someone next to 5 years down the road. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to something that I think is important, which is if you've got Mitch Moses for the next 5 seasons, you want to make maximum use of him. You should be going close to winning a title with a player of his caliber in the team, provided you've got the right players there with him. And I think the Eels have to invest in a player or two who will raise the standard of the team rather than just complement Mitch Moses. I think we need to have another star in the team. That's, we've, over recent seasons, our buying policy has been to look for value and look for players who will, I guess, who maybe haven't reached their potential as yet. And we've seen it. We saw the success of it with the number of players that BA was able to elevate either back into representative honours if they had been there before, or up to a representative honours player. I like the fact that we got Zach Lomax as he was hitting the high point in his career.
Yeah, that's exactly the sort of profile you want in a recruit. And we speak about this, don't we, Craig? And we had a big chat about this away from the podcast just by telephone. But we've mentioned in the podcast that you want to be a development club. You want to be having, waves and generations of talent coming through. But sometimes one particular class of kids is not going to have a back rower, or it's not going to have a centre. It's not going to have a dummy half. And that's what your recruitment is for, to augment what you develop internally, to go out and find the proven talent or a blue chip young player from another club that you want to take a risk on, as we saw with Penrith and Viliami Kikau going way back now after his breakout year as a Holden Cup player for the North Queensland Cowboys. That's what you use your recruitment for. Is you can find some value guys, which the Eels have sort of erred towards perhaps too much in recent years, but go out and get your Zach Lomaxes. Go out and get your Lockie Galvins if that's going to be your guy. They're going to be your proven, known talents that can help facilitate the development of those other kids internally.
Yeah, and Chris, you referenced Riley Smith, and that a player can just drop out of nowhere and suddenly be an integral player for the team. Well, young Riley was a player that John and I spoke about quite a bit last year when we were reviewing Jersey Flegg matches, and then at the end of season review, I was a little bit surprised he didn't pick up one of the gongs. No, I was very surprised he didn't pick up one of the gongs for Jersey Flegg at the Ken Thornett medal. Not that there was anything wrong with the selections that were made, but simply he had just such a great season. Now, knowing that he had a pre-season contract, you knew he was going to impress the coaches just with his level of fitness for a start. And sometimes with players, it's just getting that opportunity to show their wares. And coaches like Jason Ryles and Nathan Brown and Scott Weisband or Sam Mower, they're coming into the season without any sort of prejudices and with fresh eyes that they're looking at the roster with. So he had that chance to impress, and his levels of fitness allowed him to do what he did at the end of that game against the Dragons. That it wasn't his only big effort play by far in the match, but it was a big effort play in the 83rd minute. And if you're making one of those big effort plays in the 83rd minute, that's something that a lot of other players aren't going to be able to do. And in the end, it becomes a difference maker. So, yes, you can get players who can drop out of nowhere. But you'd also like to think that the Eels staff are all over who is likely to progress to NRL. And this is where I really want them to make sure that they get that recruitment aspect of it right, in terms of getting the right players alongside Mitch Moses to ensure that we are actually competing for the title during Mitch's time at the club. We can't get to the end of that 5 years and go, well, we've been working on this club, it's been a rebuild for the last 5 years, and now we're getting closer to fruition. And he's finished with the club, but as you suggested, if you can recruit someone like a Lockie Galvin, not only do you add that little bit of extra quality to the team with Mitch Moses, you've then got a successor as well. And then you're looking at the next bloke that can play alongside him. We just got to keep building. And I don't know that we build just by complementary players. So anyway, that's for smarter minds than mine at the club to decide. So, John, any other questions?
We power on very quickly. Some strong thoughts on Darwin from Jamie and rugby league history, thoughts that we do share. We are all very happy to be getting away from the top end. Had some great success there early on, but obviously the tide turned, unfortunately, the other way. Rugby league history does say the Cullen Throw will be travelling to Darwin. No. But that is one of the big regrets, isn't it, Sixties, is that...
I have no regret about not travelling.
I do, because... just because our great mate Joe Briffer, who's no longer with us, did go to Darwin one time and had an absolute blast and swore by how great the trip was. And it would have been a great cultural rugby league experience. But yes, happy to close the book on Darwin there. Jason,
you don't mind visiting places where the local wildlife can eat you?
It's true. But I did have a friend also spend a number of years up in Darwin for work, so it would have lined up nicely to go and see him, but it just didn't work out. Jason does ask you, Sixties, probably can't say too much, but has the win had a positive effect at training? I think you've only seen a bit of a session today, so not too much mail to report, even if you could spill, but there's no doubt that the vibes around the joint would be pretty good.
Yeah, no, I did catch the full session today, John. It was quite positive. Do you know what the overriding thing was? As I understand it, they enjoyed themselves for a short period of time in the sheds. The players enjoyed the win, and then it's like straight into focusing on this upcoming week. So it has genuinely been a positive vibe at training all through the losses. But last week in particular, you could just tell they were on last week. They just were really on. It was just such a good vibe. We get to see a little bit of tomorrow. You and I, John, will be doing our recording with Steve Georgalis probably when the back end of the training's happening tomorrow. So we might catch about 3/4 of an hour of the session tomorrow. So be interesting to see.
And then to wrap things up, we got one question for the Peanut Gallery, and that's our rule now. One from the Peanut Gallery every week. But also Gallagher's got a question about Lockie Galvin, or sort of the surrounding background of Galvin. Do we go all out for Lachlan Galvin, or do we persevere for junior like Twiddle or another gun junior from a rival club to replace Brown? Look, there is merit to all these thoughts here, boys, and whichever way the club goes, I'm sure there'll be people that felt they should have gone the other way, and vice versa. Galvin, obviously, very much a proven talent in the NRL now, got a huge ceiling. What I will say about someone like Arpa Twiddle is that he projects really heavily, like, from mine at least, boys, to a pre-injury Adam Dewey or Adam Dwahi, where he is a very versatile, talented back that can play fullback, centre, 5/8. And I think that, assuming that he continues to progress, the Eels will find a way to integrate him into the back line some way, somehow. He doesn't have to be number 6 in that, necessarily. But yeah, there's definitely merit there. I'm very much, you're either going for Galvin or you're going internally. I don't think going after another junior is worth the money it would take to prize them away without knowing that there'd be a proven NRL quality, as opposed to developing someone like Talatiner or Fletcher or Twiddle if you're not going the Galvin path. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are there, boys, but that's definitely where I am at.
I think Chris, we'll throw to Chris for this because I probably had my say in an earlier question. So, Chris?
Yeah, I don't really have a thought on it. I'll be honest with you. 60s.
People get paid way more money than us to answer that question privately, obviously. But this is we do have thoughts, obviously, but giving you a definitive answer is well above our pay grade because, like I said, there is very serious merit to multiple lines of thought here, and it'll be very interesting to see which way the club goes because sliding doors, branching paths moment, 100% coming up.
John, Chris, if they don't pursue someone like Lockie Galvin, which I'd be disappointed if they didn't, and I would actually expect that they would, if he's available to pursue, because who knows, he might sign an extension with the Tigers before he becomes actually available for clubs to talk to in November. I don't see that happening, but, you know, rugby league has produced some strange results, i.e. Dylan Brown. So, you know, you can think something might happen and the opposite happens. So, however, it's Captain Obvious to say that if they don't spend the money pursuing a replacement for Dylan Brown, there will be money there to spend elsewhere. And I come back to saying they need to make a big signing or a significant signing anyway to help to maximise the time that we have where Mitch Moses is Parramatta Eel. So
I don't have any doubt, 60s, that that's going to be the case. You know, I think this year is a little bit of a holding pattern, but I fully suspect we'll go to the market pretty hard. Jono has obviously captured the fact that it's a pretty light free agency class next year, but I don't know how relevant that topic is because
what's a contract worth these days? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't know who's going to come free, what's going to become available. I'll just say one thing just about how we build a roster, and if you guys might be aware that there's been a series of articles written recently ranking the best players for the club by position, and it's given me a chance to reflect on how we built our most successful teams. And if I look at, I'd call that 76 to 86 team the golden era. But if I look at I'll call it the silver era, which is probably 96 through to 2009, where they did everything but win a premiership. I think they made 7 preliminary finals, 2 grand finals. If you look at how that team was constructed, to your point, 60s, where you're kind of beseeching the club to spend some money, it all came off the back of the Super League war, where we recruited the four Bulldogs, Gary Freeman, Adam Ritson. There was a series of guys who came, and what that did was that built a winning formula around the club, a winning identity for the club, and off the back of that, you then were able to bring through the young players, and that's where you had Nathan and Ian Highmarsh, Nathan and Jason Kalis, and various other guys. Once those guys were all in place, then you were able to supplement with recruits. And that's the likes of Daniel Wagon and Gary Larson and players like that who then came through later on. So I think, to your point, it needs to be a combination, and it can't just be juniors based. You've got to, I think we need a circuit breaker, just like the Bulldogs now. You look at the Bulldogs, and Gus, obviously, chicanery is his middle name when it comes to salary cap management, but he's gone out and recruited heavily. He's turned over the roster several times. And now you can see what's happening in their junior base. They now have juniors coming through. Those guys will be able to come through on more affordable contracts to supplement the likes of Matt Burton, etc. But they're doing that from a foundation of winning, as opposed to where we are, which is currently down towards the bottom of the table. So we need to get back to a winning position, and then we can start to really focus on our pathways coming through as an addition to the stars we have.
Yep. Okay, John.
There are some more questions, guys, but we do need to move on. So the last one from the Peanut Gallery, Ben Johnson, didn't realise Chris had tattoos. Does he have a Parramatta tattoo? And if not, will he get one with me and Fletch when we win the comp? If Fletch is still underage, I'll buy a home tattoo gun. I love you got to take it all in. Got to take it.
I do have an Eels tattoo, Ben. I got excited after the 22 prelim, so I've got the cartoon eel there, you can see. So whether that's a wise thing to do or not, it's certainly open to everyone's individual discretion. But I do have one, but I would not be opposed to getting another one if and when we win the comp later this year, probably.
Yeah, you know, it's I love listening to Ben give it to Fletch from time to time, especially when Ben called into training one day and was enjoying watching training and sent a message off to Fletch saying, "Hope he's enjoying school today." Just, yeah, great dynamic between father and son there. Brilliant stuff. Okay, we'll try to get to some of the questions at the end, and we're also conscious of the fact that Chris is only with us for a short period of time after the musical interlude. So, John, what's our musical interlude today?
Like I said, a bit self-indulgent, boys, after that breakthrough win. So we're going for an extended version of the interlude this week, and it's a bit of a follow-on from the theme of the hero's journey and the sort of epic music that would go along with that, and interspice with some of the best moments from the weekend. So I'm hoping that the audio levels are okay here because I sort of had the rush for the editing for this one. Let's get into it. Okay, here we go.
Smith, Dylan Brown, Iongi gets away from Sully. It opens up for Josh and O'Carr, and the Eels are in for their first of the afternoon. And the kickoff return has yielded a result for the Eels. Big contact on David Clemmer. Ball comes free, and Parramatta find themselves in great position. Their leader, Junior Barlaw. Brown. Now Isaiah Iongi shows it to the outside, goes by himself and comes around to score the try. Isaiah Iongi. Hawkins, here's Brown, lane charging, and again they were waiting for him. Surley, along with Ilias, they detangle. Last play, Hawkins kicks across the field, out towards Tui Pilotu. He missed it, and diving on it, Gideon Kautonga. The Eels will kick to level us up at CommBank Stadium.
So today was, down 20 to 8, and they got back to their strengths and worked their way back into it and found a way, and that's the NRL. That's sometimes it's not pretty, but you just got to find ways to do things, and they did.
Zach Lomax, over to you. And it's straight through. Flags are up, 20 all. They're back on level terms, the Eels.
Just looking at the foot of Tyrell Sloan.
If it's simultaneous, it's out.
Grounded simultaneously on the touchline, which is out. We have a decision.
Ball away. Here's Gutherson again. Gutherson pulls free of the defence. Good tackle. Fullback on fullback. Isaiah Iongi on the veteran. Got him one-on-one. 8 scores level again. Gets it nicely. It goes through the posts. Even going higher. Flags are up. Zach Lomax. Oh, the shot from Junior Barlaw on Toby Countsman. How much does Junior want to win this game? Now Lockie Ilias goes out on the ball.
And again, it's a Riley Smith.
Yeah.
Pressure on. Jim Chase here from Marker.
Go now. He's right in front. Zach Lomax to hand Parramatta their first win of the season, and hit it upright and went through. The former Dragon hands his coach another former Dragon. wins as Parramatta Eels in 2025.
Goose pimples still. Goose pimples still after hearing that again.
Huh? You're telling our gameplay.
Yeah. You only got to watch what we're doing.
Little Easter egg there at the end. Yeah, so Matty Russell, the muscle, with the call there. And yes, Gallagher knows the song. Well done. Aurora XV54, a great little cinematic piece there. You can catch that one on YouTube. And yeah, good shout out there, Gallagher. Good ears. But yeah, one of my favourite little orchestral pieces for that sort of thing. And yeah, like I said, a bit self-indulgent, but I think the Eels earned that one and we earned that one after persevering through a very tough start to the season.
Absolutely, fellas. And we always get a lot of feedback about, we've got through the first hour or so of the podcast and we'll get round to the second hour later. We do intentionally separate it into Eels news and NRL news so that and have that intermission there so that people can either go and grab a coffee or it might be their trip to work and the trip home from work. They listen to the NRL news, or maybe they just leave it till another day, whatever the case may be. We've now got the NRL news and we're going to start off with Serenity Now. NRL officials.
Yeah. Oh my God.
NRL officials.
Oh my
that
God.
crackdown on the high shots.
At what cost? At what cost? And you know what? I saw this sentiment echoed on Reddit, and I agree massively. I feel for the officials right now because they're on a hiding to nothing with these crackdowns. If they don't fulfill the crackdown and hit their KPIs on high tackles and sin bins, they get absolutely reamed behind closed doors, but they get absolutely destroyed by fans because of it. So, look, there were some legitimate sin bins this week, boys, but there were some soft sin bins. And then suddenly, I think on the other games on Saturday, the bin got forgotten. So I have no idea. It was all over the place. And while the crackdown on high shots was taking place, the forgetfulness on forward passes reigned supreme. So God knows what's happening.
Chris, my feeling on this is pretty straightforward, which is I think the NRL sets up match officials for failure.
Yep.
I think they expect far too much from them. And I understand the motivations for some of it, especially around the headshots, that sort of thing. But it is a full contact sport and accidents happen. And I don't think players should be punished for accidents. That's not going to change the nature of the game. What does change the nature of the game is the rules that they brought in around the head bin and stand down rules and that sort of stuff if a head injury occurs. Because we know that in the old days, players were considered soft if they got a knock to the head and were replaced. They just stayed on. It was almost a badge of courage if they didn't remember the game. And for mine, as a layman, I'm suggesting that a lot of those players from the past that unfortunately are having those brain injury issues as they're getting older, it's as a result of playing on with concussion or getting multiple concussions in a game or concussions over multiple weeks, whereas nowadays they'd be off the field or stood down. I fear for some aspects of the game, and I hope they can find the right balance. And I also hope that they look for a way to make the game easier for referees instead of making it that much harder all the time.
Agree with everything. And we spoke about it at some length last week, didn't we? And it kind of manifested itself on the field in the way that we suspected it would, with inconsistency from game to game, head-scratching decisions. And, it's hard to feel, you don't want to be on the wrong side of anything that causes brain damage. Obviously, all of us are fully committed to the safety and health of the players, and that's something that had to change from the 80s and 90s, and it has. And I think we spoke about this, the really dirty, malicious shots have pretty much been rubbed out of the game. You don't have the Hopewadi on Keith Galloway shots anymore. You don't have those kind of tackles in the game. So realistically, I think a lot of it's has been achieved. The other thing they've done, in recent years, maybe what's it now, 10 years or so, they've gotten rid of the shoulder charge. Can't remember the exact year they got rid of it, but they've made a lot of changes that have really gotten rid of a lot of the really impactful tackles or the really negligent tackles. And now, to your point, if you get a slightly careless shot across the head, okay, it's a penalty, fine. But doesn't deserve to be on report, doesn't deserve to go on in the bin. These things, it's such a competitive, close league that all of these decisions can have a huge impact on the momentum of the game and can subsequently or consequently impact the final result. And it makes it pretty challenging, I think. I don't know if these crackdowns are necessary. Just referee the game as it's supposed to be refereed, and if the bunker did its job and pulled up the really bad tackles, then I think we'd all be okay. But yeah, I'm fully aligned with you guys on this one. It was pretty confusing over the weekend, and it definitely changed the way the game has been played in the first 4 rounds of the season. So it's a pretty tough one to understand.
Yeah, John, anything extra you want to add?
Oh, I think we've set our piece on the referees for a number of years now on the podcast and in our written sort of prose as well on the website. The NRL, like you said, set their officials up to fail far too often, and these crackdowns are perhaps the most egregious examples of it. And yeah, I just wish we could. Look, we all know player welfare is important, but like you said, Chris, they have eliminated some of the most violent and dangerous outlier plays in the game. You don't see really reckless and intentional swinging arms anymore. You don't see shoulder charges, and if you do see a shoulder charge, they're they get penalised immediately, but they're also far safer in their execution. Not these, psychotic, hurling of mass into a ball carrier without regard for yourself or them. The game is much safer. There are mechanisms now if a player does get hurt to facilitate a safer recovery from head injuries. Just let's focus on keeping the product now clean with the whistle. And we don't need to do crackdowns. Just call a high shot when you see a high shot instead of letting it get out of hand. Anyway, the games weren't, I'd argue, overtly impacted for a lot of them, but there were some pretty weak sin bins and also weak suspensions. Ray Stone, very unlucky, I felt like, to get binned and suspended, but there were also guys like Piakura and Tino Fa'asuamala-Awi who had legitimately bad shots that got penalised, sin binned, and also suspended. So it was a normal transactional weekend in terms of these offences. Just the NRL chose to make a big deal out of it. So
on a related topic, the NRL muzzling coaches from talking about it or influencing talk shows with the stance that they want people to take. John, I know you've got some pretty strong opinions on this.
Well, first of all, no one has come knocking on TCT's door with a sort of blank check or a cash check and a mandate to talk about certain things, which is a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. But yes, we aren't sellouts in that regard. Craig has been on record saying yes.
I'm on record. I'll jump off this podcast with the right offer. So
I am conflicted here because the independence of the media is important, but there is also a very I don't know if incestuous is the right word, but given the historical ties of the game between News Limited and the NRL, like the Fox NRL connection, it's not the normal media connection, and having extra influence there is not a surprise. Yeah, I would like to see more clarity about what's happening there. And shout out, I think it was Danny White that actually pushed back in that regard. So shout out there. Once you start influencing the narrative and controlling what is spoken about, you get into very murky water and into the mud very quickly. So I would definitely hope that it doesn't get too far out of hand. But we know that Volandis has always been very aggressive in how he wants to sort of manage the image of the game, and that also goes hand in hand with sort of making the media feed out of your hand. But yeah, look, coaches getting muzzled. I think Des Hasler's the big one here, isn't he? Coming out of the weekend, he was very critical of the crackdown. This is also a bit of a cutting off your nose to spite your face, because some of the best drama, like the drama that sells and engages fans on social media and to get involved in the game, is coach drama. Ricky Stewart, Des Hasler, they've been masters of it for a long time. And I get that you want to protect, again, the product and the central body of the code and the officials. But I do think you should be giving the coaches some reign, some mandate to be able to be critical in that regard. And the worst comes to worst, you fine them. And we've seen them get fined heavily. You know, Ricky's accrued hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines. So it's not like it doesn't hurt the hip pocket. But yeah, that's where I'm at with this. I am curious to see if anything more manifests from this, because this is the first time we've seen pushback from the media, or at least some branches of the media, in regards to having the oversight of the game's governing body being too influential. And I do wonder if shows like 360 and whatnot, who have been very, I suppose, PVL and Abdo friendly in that regard, do have some pushback there.
Chris, I'm sure you love a good coach drama. And the game wouldn't be the same without a Ricky blow up as well, with Des hot on the heels. How do you see this?
It is a very tricky situation, because on the one hand, all of these guys are ambassadors for the final product and ambassadors for the code. And so when you have someone who's actively kind of railing against that, it can hurt you with sponsors. It can hurt the game's image. It can hurt a number of things. I think, you talked about Jono talked about the symbiotic relationship between the News Corp guys and the NRL, and it is a bit of a strange one, because they clearly get first dibs. But if I look at Phil Gould, as he's always blaming the media, with the irony obviously being that he's one of the most influential voices in the media of the last 30 years. But Phil Gould, with his position and his view on concussions and various other things, which at best maybe old-fashioned, at worst irresponsible, I would say. He does have the platform and the voice where he can really hurt what the game is trying to achieve there. On the flip side, you do want people to have a voice. So, I know I've just said a lot of words which haven't given you anything definitive. I'm just articulating that it is a very complex topic. And what the right thing is going to be different to everybody. What's clear to me is the coaches should be allowed to speak their mind. There should be some protection for them to some degree. I think there should be accountability for everyone involved. And, if the coaches are out of line and they're calling out the game or calling out players or referees where it's unjust, then by all means, fine them, do what you have to do. But if Graham Annesley shows up on a Monday morning and talks about some dreadful refereeing decisions, and the coach has done the same thing 48 hours earlier and they cop a fine for it, then it doesn't quite ring true to me. So, I wouldn't want to see the game overreaching too far in this regard.
I guess to play devil's advocate as well, it wasn't unusual in the past if particular coaches had a blow up about the referee that supporters would react and say, look, they're trying to influence. This particular coach is always influencing the ref, and then you're watching to see the next time that whether they get better calls that happen as a result of having a blow up in the press conference or what have you. So I do see that there's pros and cons, no matter which side that you take with it. But I guess if you go with that blanket, can't say anything about the refs that can't comment on them in that regard. I guess there's no grey area. It's just black and white. So I wish it was the same with some of the other aspects of match officiating, for example, that it was black and white rather than so many shades of grey. Anyway, just moving on. the WA expansion looks like it's dead in the water.
Speaking
fellas.
of PVL strong opinions, it feels like there's been a pretty big clash of egos here, hasn't there, boys?
Is this just a power play, however, by PVL and the NRL to get exactly what they want from the West Australian government to make it happen?
But who's holding the cards here? Because Western Australia is a pretty staunch AFL state right now. I know league would bring money to the state, but they're also, the world's richest natural resource like province in terms of sort of metals and those sort of resources. So it's not like their economy's struggling. I don't know. This feels like a bit of a whiff from the NRL, boys. And we're not privy to the inner workings, so we are looking at this from an extremely surface level, like a very thin layer here. But we went from, it felt like we were set for a press conference to announce them a few months ago to we're all in on PNG and that's it. And I don't know what comes of this, but it feels wrong not wrong, but it always has been a bit of a misnomer to call yourself the NRL, the National Rugby League, if you're not properly representing states like Western Australia and South Australia. And I know that they are AFL entrenched states, but the Super League, I suppose, leaves a bad smell for the NRL there. This feels like we're taking the wrong direction. And maybe Western Australia being completely unreasonable, but we know that there are big egos involved here, and the NRL was not, maybe strong arm is not the right word for it, but they're being very bullish on what they want out of this expansion. And it's obviously backfired here, and it would be a real shame to see all the work done by the Pirates and all the other pathways programs over in Perth amount to nothing. And I do hope that this doesn't become sort of burned and buried and dead in the water.
Chris, I think when the NRL consolidated all the teams from the Australian Rugby League and the Super League, and the Reds were one of the teams that paid the price for that, and you had a lot of their players were then put into a Melbourne team. I could see the logic of getting a Melbourne team up and running, with it being the second most populous state and, really deserving of, from that regard, being not deserving, but being a real target market, for the NRL. So they're covering the Eastern Seaboard. But honestly, I think the market is there in Western Australia, if not the economics also.
And the time zone, like for the TV deal, it's huge, having the late night zone.
It seems like there are so many ticks there. It's hard to understand why they're not moving ahead, or don't appear to be moving ahead with a bid.
It's honestly, it's something just like you with the crackdown 60s. This is one that really gets my blood boiling. I find it incredibly frustrating. Contrast to the AFL, and you just referenced it, Jono, which is a national competition. And 13 years ago, 14 years ago, the AFL expanded into Western Sydney, GWS. I guarantee you this was not underwritten in any way by the New South Wales government. This was the AFL looking at their potential to expand into a new market. They invested heavily into it. I mean, Israel Folau is maybe not the best option as a player, but, they put their best coach, Kevin Sheedy, there as an ambassador for the game. And they gave them draft compensation. So they basically gave both GWS and the Gold Coast Suns, the two new teams, every opportunity to succeed in those markets, because they saw it as expansion markets in what was a fairly mature competition. The same goes here. It's to Jono's point. WA is arguably the wealthiest state we have, mineral rich. They have a premier who is a big rugby league fan. So this is the time. This is the opportunity to do it. They have pathway system. They've got a stadium that's there. Look at the Western Force. That team gets fans along. If you look at when the Wallabies play out there, even in the old days when they were playing at Subiaco, but now they play at Optus, they sell that thing out. There's a combination of a sporting mad population and plenty of East Coast expats out there. it just feels crazy to me. I feel like the NRL has overreached. They've maybe overstated their own leverage in this conversation, and now it's hard for them to backtrack to a point where we're going to get the outcome that the game should get. Add into that, obviously, for those of us who've been fans of the game for a long time, the romantic element of seeing the Bears back in some sort of iteration would be nice. But beyond all that, the game needs a Perth team, a WA team. You know, the time difference is fantastic for TV rights negotiations. You know, I can understand you don't need Adelaide, although all those diehard Rams fans would probably say something different, but you need to have Perth. If it's purely financial, I think all of us would agree PNG is nowhere near as meritorious as a Perth bid if you're just looking at the two in the vacuum. However, clearly there's a bit going on behind the scenes here. I get that probably the NRL's trying to walk a bit of a tightrope with trying to keep the existing clubs happy. But they don't do that the rest of the time. So I just think that they just need to bite the bullet and say, right, okay, well, as Parramatta fans, we've had 40 years without a premiership. We can take a few more. We hope we don't. But if it's for the good of the game, get a Western Australian team in. So I find it incredible that they've messed this up. Hopefully they haven't, but it looks like they have.
Well, to your point about the AFL, the fact that they've persevered with GWS, because they obviously are performing on the field, but they're still playing in front of mostly empty stadium. It's, I don't care what crowd they post. If you ever switch onto a Giants game being played down at the showground at Homebush or whatever they call the stadium now, it is empty stands. They've maybe got, in reality, 6,000 to 8,000 people that are there because the ground only holds 23,000 and it's 2/3 empty. So they've maintained the investment.
Yeah, and I mean, for a few weeks of the year, they've got the paddle pop line driving around in a V8 around the outside of that stadium. Who cares? Anyway. Sorry, Sixties.
Look, as someone who was a teacher in Western Sydney,
the Auskick programs,
and the PWSA that the school I was teaching at was part of was in the Auburn district. So we know we're talking about right there in virtually where the stadium is over there at Lidcombe, Homebush, but that sort of area. The investment that they gave for kids to play AFL, I thought was just going to be a splash in the pan. It was they provided people to umpire the games. They looked after the competition rules and competition tables, set the fields up, all the sort of stuff that teachers have to do in every other PWSA sport. They just threw the resources into it so that it would be as easy as possible for kids to play AFL. And they maintained that. So they've, it wasn't just setting up a team. It was all of the stuff that they do around it that they've continued to invest in and still continuing to invest in, when the people of Western Sydney haven't really embraced the game. They're prepared to play the long game with that, simply because they believe they should have a second Sydney team in their competition. And, you can only congratulate them for being prepared to invest those sorts of resources. I wish in this instance the NRL was prepared to throw the resources into Western Australia, because we don't want the NRL to go into financial difficulties because they're backing a team in Western Australia. You have to get all of everything right, which, it would seem that if it's purely on an economic basis where it is just completely unsustainable on the models that they've seen, we couldn't criticize the NRL for that. But it looks like it's maybe some of the fine details where they're not quite happy with something. And so I don't know whether they're just not prepared to compromise, but it just seems straightforward that a team in Western Australia in Perth would be a great addition to the NRL. Next is maybe quite an interesting one, which again comes back to the NRL, buying a share in the Super League, John.
Yeah, coming up sort of just before we hit the record button and the go live button, reports that the NRL are investigating a option to take up 33.33%, 1/3 of the controlling stake in the English Super League, pending the ability to execute. I believe it was like execute essentially executive authority on the growth of the game and handling some of the strugglers or stragglers in that competition. It's been a long time sort of brewing this one, hasn't it, boys? We've gone back the last couple of years and even beyond that, but it's really gained momentum in recent years about the NRL buying into the Super League, taking a firm grip on the development of International Rugby League. It makes sense, and it would. I don't know if it strengthens NRL's portfolio in the short term, but obviously if they can get their foot in the door there and turn, you're not going to challenge obviously the English Premier League, but if they can grow the Super League, then it does become an asset, and it certainly opens up very interesting development pathways between Australia, England, and then even the hypothetical American Super League, where it becomes a more developed competition. So very interested to see how this one plays out, and it feels like this is an important moment for the future rugby league.
Chris, as someone who's based in Europe, how do you see it?
I would love to see a stronger international game. I think we need to do everything we can to protect the only legitimate alternative professional league to the NRL internationally. I don't have the greatest confidence in the NRL having the best interests of the international game at heart. I mean, we've seen for years after years. I mean, we finally have an Ashes tour this year, which is fantastic. And I can understand in the modern era with the demands of the game, you can't have those long kangaroo tours. But I mean, all of us who grew up in those days where you had teams that would go on tour for 2-3 months, the international game, even though it wasn't as broad, it was really viable. You had the Great Britain sides, you had the Australian sides, and the Kiwi sides are all strong. And for a period of time, the English competition was as strong as the Australian competition until probably the 80s, I would suggest, or even the 90s, when we kind of got a bit of a march on them from a professionalism standpoint. But look, if done right, I think it'll be great. I just have major question marks that it will be.
Yeah. You brought back the memories with mentioning those old Ashes tours. They were the days when you'd find out which players could grow a beard, because that would be the trademark of anyone on the tour. The beards would be grown. Anyway, we move on. And finally, the Panthers winless in Australia in 2025 is the first stat. Second stat, and it might be a bit concerning for the Panthers, is that their male pathways teams finished 13th and 12th. And they only, each of those grades, the Harold Matts and the SG Ball, only won 2 games during the season, each team.
First of all, motion to change the name from Penrith Panthers to the Tariff Panthers, since they want to localise all their production in America.
Yes.
Very
good. Very good.
But yeah, look, it feels weak to say that this is the eventual downfall of the Panthers. They won 4 titles on the trot and had untold success in the juniors, but the juggernaut is clearly slowing down, boys. They went out and made splashy recruits in the NRL. They went and got Blaze Talangi and they got Isaiah Papali'i. And look, they've had injury, like bad luck, but in recent years that never stopped them. Cleary has been out for extended windows and multiple premiership winning seasons, and they were fine, but not now. So yeah, I do think that the pipeline is running a little bit dry. There is still talent in their pathways, no doubt, but it is not the overwhelming just wave of golden age like talent that they had that built the nucleus of that team and got pulled apart obviously in recent seasons. But yeah, the fact that they're missing finals and the fact that they're having to recruit externally and still not have the impact that they want, maybe we are looking at the end of an era. And it'll be interesting to see if this is an end of an era. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the club and the sort of decisions they make. Are they going to be ruthless in terms of the tear down rebuild, or are they going to sort of try and milk or sort of persist with the aging veterans and the core of that team that had so much success? Because the pragmatic answer is obviously going for the former and being ruthless, but fans don't like that. Club administrators don't like that because you do get attached to guys that have had so much success. So, yeah, this is a very interesting story to monitor, and it is a funny headline, a sort of monkey's paw moment where, if you're a Parramatta fan and you were told that nearly 6 weeks into the competition you could be on the same amount of wins as the Penrith Panthers and the Sydney Roosters, you'd be like, oh hell yeah, get me in there. We're going to the title, and then here we are with in the quagmire. And obviously you look at, I say in the quagmire on projections right now, Penrith have got a better roster than the Eels, but the feeling right now is better in Paradise than it is at Penrith. The media are finally starting to get their claws into the Panthers. The Eels have got their breakthrough win. They've got reinforcements on the horizon. Again, knock on wood. But you got a couple of winnable games against the Raiders and the Tigers, and then a bye, and suddenly your season, the trajectory has just changed completely. Penrith, I don't know what they're just in the doldrums right now, and I think they get Dylan Edwards back, but they don't have a solution at 5'8" opposite Cleary. I think that Blaze gets the nod this week, but he has not been the plug-and-play talent that they were hoping he would be. They could very much turn it around, but at the same time, the wheels could fall off.
Chris, this is actually, I believe, the second year in a row that their junior teams in the boys have not qualified for finals football. So this is not like, okay, it's a bad season. This is now extended. Yeah. It's, and we're talking about, I think they came around about the 8th and 10th mark or something like that last year when it wasn't the top 8. And they've declined in the results this season. It feels like it's a trend. There's probably a bunch of Parramatta supporters who hope it's a trend. But you'd have to think they'd be doing a bit of an inquiry up there at Penrith into the performance of their pathways teams, because like the Eels, and we talked about at the start, there would be a minimum expectation, you would think, of playing in finals football, especially if it's a top 8, when you are such a strong junior club.
I think Jono mentioned when you're talking about the NRL, as much as we would all like to stick the boot into Penrith, when they've got Cleary and Edwards and Yo on the field, they're still in quite a healthy position. They are
going to improve, aren't they? They will improve this season. Where they are now, you would think.
I would love to see them come last, but unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. And maybe there's a little bit of Schadenfreude there when we talk about. I would take the Iongi. I would take Iongi over Blaze Talangi based on what we've seen this year. And again, obviously, as Parramatta fans, that's kind of what we want anyway. There was obviously a fair bit of disappointment when Blaze left the club last year. But based on what we've seen there, I think I think we've come out the better of that particular swap, and our pathways teams are doing really well, and theirs are going horribly. So the key for us, and again, we'll be self-referential with Parramatta at this point. We need to bring them through. We need to capitalize on where we sit right now, because Penrith managed to do it 5 or 6 years ago. Gus into Cleary did a great job at sort of bringing through the right players and keeping the right players, and that built them for sustained success. They're going to have a lot of hard decisions to make, Penrith, in the coming months, because if they are right up against the salary cap, totally different to us. We've got a lot of space. We have flexibility. They do not. They either need to bet on this team being able to turn it around, or they alternatively need to create flexibility, which means there's going to be a few of their older players who are going to become free in the market at some point.
And our good mate Ben Johnson actually makes a really nice point in chat, and it's something that I knew but forgot. Look, they've had so much success, and it was success on success on success, 4 times over. But has complacency set in? Because it's always the little details that get you, isn't it? It's obviously the losses are the final end result, but even something as little as Isaiah Yo's commemorative jersey the other week, where it was an incredibly important milestone for the player and the club. I think he was their first player to make the 250 mark as a Panther, like as a pure Panther. And they got the stitching wrong on the date. They posted as a March game, I think, or as an April game, whatever it was. They got it all wrong. And they're the little things that you don't get wrong when you're at the top of your game. And that's just not just a player thing, that's just a club thing. So, yeah, maybe complacency and just the glut of success has finally, fattened them up a bit too much. I don't know.
Where were all their supporters for his 250?
Well, that's the other thing too, is that you don't want to bang your chest about how good the Eels fan base is because we suck. Like, as the team has sucked in long passages of time, we've always had fans turn up. But they've had 4 premierships. They've got all the bandwagon fans in the world, and a couple of games going the wrong way early in the season, and suddenly their fan base has just like abandoned them. And I understand they're not in Penrith right now, and they're playing out of Combank while they've got the redevelopment happening there. But the Eels, even though it was not ideal, they travelled to ANZ when we had to take our medicine for the Combank or Bankwest, then Combank redevelopment. I don't know. Like, it is always funny, and Penrith aren't the only team to have a bandwagon fan base start getting exposed, but because of their ridiculous success, they have so many bandwagon fans, and when the going gets tough, the bandwagoners get off very quickly.
It's like 25, 30 minutes along the motorway between Parramatta and Penrith.
Yeah, that's fair.
And less if it's supporters that live around St Mary's, Mount Druitt, St Clair, all of those sorts of suburbs. They've been banging on and saying, it's not the same as going to Penrith, and it's no good for us travelling out here and what have you. My goodness, they're playing out of the best rugby league stadium in Australia, suburban stadium in Australia, and it's not like it's a difficult trip to get down there. Whether they drive themselves or travel by public transport, they haven't really got any excuses to not turn up. You go to Parramatta and Penrith games at Penrith the crowd would often be split 50-50, such as the travel of the Parramatta supporters, and also there's a lot of Parramatta supporters that live out in the Penrith area, but they'd have to be disappointed with how their fans have responded, no matter which way they want to cut it. And as I said, especially with Isaiah Yo's 250th game, you would have thought that, there would have been a heavy, we don't follow Penrith's marketing, but you have to assume there would have been a heavy marketing push for that and for people to get out there and get behind him. So anyway, John, have we got any questions to finish up on?
No, we did have some going back from the Parramatta segment, which you can get through quickly, I suppose. But nothing much for the NRL section, which is understandable given that this is a heavily slanted Parramatta supporter base for the podcast. Matty Buckeyes asks, is Josh Lynn a legitimate chance of playing first grade? And we didn't mention him actually during the early discussions, but Lynn is very much in that consideration, isn't he, boys? A more steady player compared to some of the more exciting talents that we mentioned among Twiddle, Talatina and Fletcher, and Papali as well. But there is always a place for a steady hand at halfback, maybe not as a frontline playmaker at the club, but as a guy that can fill in and be a very competent backup, as we've seen with Dean Hawkins.
I think in a season like this, it's highly unlikely, simply because of the number of young players that are already in the team, and that they need someone in the halves who's going to carry that experience and be able to lead the team. So he's a player in development, and I guess we see where he goes, because this is really his first season of playing consistent senior football at the moment. Even then, he did drop back last week, didn't he, with with Jersey Flegg. Is he in that grade again this week?
He is not named anywhere this week, so either he's injured or suspended, or my little pet theory is if they take someone like Josh Papawi to Darwin, he would then step into the New South Wales Cup lineup as the replacement there. So definitely something to monitor on Saturday. More questions about the halves, which is going to be obviously a running theme for all our podcasts until the Eels figure out what's happening there, which is we're happy to take on board these questions. But Dave asked, if Moses stays fit, do we need a big name number 6? Moses runs a show and whoever else has to take a step back, which is, this is, and there's another question from Kel, which I'll get to later, but this is the counterpoint to taking a big-time recruit like Galvin, is that Moses +1 is absolutely a viable strategy for, I'd say, the majority of the regular season, but when the games tighten up and you need a game breaker, that's probably where you look to someone like a Galvin or whoever they choose to chase in that regard. But there's definitely merit to this thought that Moses is a hyper-dominant on-ball playmaker. Like he cannibalizes possessions, and he makes great impact from that. So you could look to having a less dominant, less like flashy signing there and spending money elsewhere, which Kel will ask a question about shortly. But yeah, there is definitely merit to that thought. It's just that having 2 star playmakers means that when the game tightens up and there's great defense from your opposition, you've got another option to generate something when there is not much there for purchase.
Yep. Chris, anything you want to add?
No, just back on the Josh Lynn topic. I wonder if he's the kind of player with his versatility can play 6, 7, or potentially be a 13 in the future as well. So maybe he's a guy that can kind of round out our bench a little bit as well and give you a bit more of that versatility. With regards, we've talked about the number 6 position ad nauseum over the last couple of weeks, and to Jono's point, we're going to continue to do it. But if you look at the other clubs that are successful in the league, that's always a pretty good way to sort of understand what it takes to construct a title winning.
Immediately, when you think of that, the 2 combinations that come to mind are Hughes Munster, and then obviously it's now being broken, but Luai Cleary, and that they're classical organising half plus running like 5'8". And I know Hughes likes to run the ball too, but it is very much the classic combination.
And now we're seeing Penrith not quite being the same without that combination.
And the Melbourne Storm looking vulnerable. Obviously, they trounced Manly last week, but prior to that, without Jerome Hughes, they looked very vulnerable against St. George to the point they got ambushed. So that balance in the halves is important for those tough games. And Gallagher takes the opposing stance there, saying that Galvin is a specialist left side half. He would complement Moses perfectly. Yes, that is true. Specialist left side half is very much a dominant ball runner, but does have more strings to his bow than that. If you're talking about theoretical matches, it is as good a match in the NRL as you're going to get. And then the last question from Kel, which is now exploring the idea that we don't recruit someone like Galvin. If we don't target a big name for 5'8", which position do you think we should use the money for to target a big recruit in? And this is definitely a discussion that has plenty of merit and thought to it. Boys, our roster definitely has some holes in it, and it's also got some strengths to it. So if we were to save money on a star 5'8", who would you be targeting, or what position would you be targeting, sort of taking away the free agency class? What is our biggest need?
Probably from a star player perspective, back row. It hasn't... I think there is potential there that just hasn't manifested as such. I think Gideon Katonga has the potential to be the Eels version of Olakau'atu. But he's got a long way to go in that regard. He could be just the slow burn that's there. He's very inexperienced. He's got some errors in him, but I think he could be a genuine attacking weapon. And then I look at players coming through like Will Latu, like Tyrese Lokini, like Josiah Funaiuta, who are all strike back rowers as well. So I think there's, as I said, I think the Eels have strike players. They just haven't been realised as strike players as yet. So as a consequence, and I'll come back to what I've said about Moses before, we need to make the most of his time there now And for me, if you can't get a 5'8", you get someone who's going to smash through on the edges and do some damage there.
Yeah.
Chris, what do you think?
What do you got, Chris?
Yeah. Look, I mean, if you do invest in outside backs or on the edge back rowers, it helps you with your pathway discussion, doesn't it? Because you know, when it comes to your forward pack, it's pretty rare that you ever hear about a young forward leaving because they can't get enough opportunities. There's always opportunities if you're in the pack. So that helps that piece of it. I guess it just depends on, again, what the club thinks they have from within with regards to the sixth position, because Moses is clear. Iongi is showing plenty of potential. Riley Smith's got potential as well. It's a very, very young and inexperienced spine. Would you ideally prefer to have a couple more, like maybe one more veteran player in there? Yeah, absolutely you would. But you wouldn't, at this point, knowing what you have, you wouldn't try and move any of those guys out. So I think it has to be edge back row. It's a pretty clear gap for us. We do have money invested in that area. Unfortunately, we're just not getting value on a return on our investment there with regards to Bryce Cartwright and obviously Maddo's a middle now. But if you look at where we spent money, we have spent money there. It just those guys are playing Reggies, and so we need to get some value in the pack again.
And then I think that the natural balance to that would also be investing again in your middle. You obviously want to be winning the ruck, and if you can go find a dynamic middle forward, that is always a huge addition to your team. But back row for sure. And Ben Johnson brings up Britton Nakora, who is off contract end of 27. Nakora is a stud. Yeah, I said in chat to Ben that he is probably the most cerebral back rower in the game when it comes to the lines and timings of his runs. He just has such an incredible feel and ability to read the game. So he'd be an incredible foil to Mitchell Moses down that right edge. But the Sharks obviously love him. So it'd take a bit of work to prime out of there, but that's not to say it can't be done. And he would be a very good senior influence on the young players for sure. But yeah, I'd also think that after back rower, prop forward or a dynamic lock forward is always a great consideration. And the reason I don't bring up the back line outside of fullback, which we now have as Iongi in, is that it feels like back line should just be like the most natural production line for any NRL club. And the Eels probably struggled a bit in that regard, boys. Although I do think that what's on the horizon is a good run of just like solid to plus NRL guys, depending on how they develop. So I'm not too worried in that regard. But we probably have let ourselves down in recent years in that same vein. So yeah, I think edge, then prop. We've got dummy half, I think, at least sorted out in the mid to long term with what we're seeing from Riley and then Jack Hudson and Lachlan Koinakis. So there's definitely options in the pathways there. And then the back line, we've got a couple of long-term fixtures in Lomax and probably Will Penasini. He's got a player option that I believe he's activated. So that sort of takes care of that. You've got Jordan Samrani and whatnot. So, yeah, those two positions definitely stand out for mine.
Well, fellas, I think that just about wraps things up.
Yeah.
And looking at the time, it well and truly should wrap things up.
Should have been wrapped up a little while ago. But yes, big week of Parramatta results heading into the finals for the junior reps and plus the breakthrough NRL win. So a lot to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we said at the start of the show, if you can give a like and subscribe, no matter what platform you're watching or listening to this on, that would be fantastic. Thanks to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, and also to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, where you'll see us on home match days up in Sturlos. And also we thank them for their support of our coverage of Junior Rugby League with the Junior Reps season. As we're now in the finals, it gets even more exciting to cover that on behalf of Parramatta Leagues Club. And, of course, they do they're the generous benefactor for the entire Junior Rugby League in the Parramatta district, over $300,000 of support every year that they provide for Parramatta juniors. And fellas, thank you for another fine show. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. And as we always say, go you mighty Eels.